Dear students, so far we finished two prose lessons. The first one is Of Studies, written by Francis Bacon, and the second one is The Secret of Work, written by Swami Vivekananda. And then, actually, in the syllabus, we have J.C. Bose, written by Aldous Huxley, but for this academic year, because of COVID 19, one of the prose lessons, that is the third prose lesson, which is titled as J.C. Bose by Aldous Huxley, was removed from the syllabus, and so we will go to the fourth prose lesson, that is In Celebration of Being Alive, written by Dr. Christian Barnard. So the fourth lesson, which you can see on the screen, In Celebration of Being Alive, written by Dr. Christian Barnard. So before getting into the lesson, I ask all of you to go to the page where you can find about the author. So let us go to the page where we can find about the author. So let us know about the author first, and then let us come back to the lesson. Before knowing about the author, let me tell you the title significance of this particular essay, In Celebration of Being Alive. In celebration of being alive. So, what is the meaning of this? So, praising and celebrating as you are alive, and we must not cry over what you don't have, what we don't have. So, what the title says to us is that we must praise God and we must celebrate our life because we are living and we are alive. But we must not cry over what we don't have, what we are lacking. We must be satisfied with what we have and we must enjoy our life. This is the title significance, and Dr. Christian Barnard explains clearly about this title and its explanation in this particular essay. So let us come to know about that. Before getting into the essay, I need every one of you to understand something about the author first, and then let us come back to the essay. I'm reading, you just look at that. Christian Barnard, from 1922 to 2001, was a South African heart surgeon who did the world's first successful human heart transplant operation. So he was the South African heart surgeon, South African cardiologist, who did the world's first successful human heart transplant operation. So he was the first doctor who did the changing of a heart of a person to another person. I mean that he changed one person's heart to another person's heart. So he was the successful person in doing a human heart transplant operation. He was the first person to do that. Next, he was born on 8th November 1992 in Beaufort West, Cape Province, South Africa. So this is the place and the date of his birth. Next, his father was a church pastor and his family was not rich. One of his four brothers, Abraham, died of a heart problem at the age of 5. So, this is about his family. So, his father was a church pastor, and his family was not such rich. And one of his four brothers, by the name Abraham, died of a heart problem at the age of 5. So, he has seen that. He has observed why and how Abraham died because of heart problem. So many people say that this incident made Christian Bernard to take the profession of heart surgeon to save the lives of many children who are suffering from heart problems and who are suffering from all the heart diseases and so on. And so he might have taken the profession because of that. Next, he passed matriculation from the Beaufort West High School and got his Bachelor of Medicine of Surgery at the University of Cape Town in 1945. So this is about his education. So he passed matriculation. Matriculation, that means schooling. Might be in our terms, he passed his SSC or 10th class from Beaufort West High School and got his Bachelor of Medicine of Surgery at the University of Cape Town in 1945. So, what is Bachelor of Medicine of Surgery? So, in our education system, it is called as MBBS. What is the uh, definition of MBBS? So, Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. So, here it is MBBS. That means he finished his MBBS studies and became doctor at the University of Cape Town in 1945. Next, his famous works are One Life, written in 1969, The Second Life, written in 1993, The Donor, written in 1996, and 50 Ways to a Healthy Heart, written in 2001. So, the essay In Celebration of Being Alive is a story narrated by Christian Bernard about the accident that he had faced along with his wife and the lessons he had learned from the children in the hospital. So, what is this essay? So, in this essay, Christian Bernard explains and narrates about the accident he had faced along with his wife. So, both of them were going somewhere and they met with the accident, he and his wife. And so, what happened later? So, and also it is the narration about two children. So, in the children's hospital where he was working, so he has observed both of them, and he had learned many lessons from those two children in the hospital. So, this particular essay talks about the accident which he and his wife faced, and next, the lessons which he had learned from the two children in the children hospital. So he's a very great person that he learned lessons from children. So we all must know that even we can learn lessons by observing many people, even children also around us. So learning lessons and learning knowledge must be from everywhere and from everybody. So he is the example for that, and so he learned lessons from the two children in the hospital. And so this is about the short biography of the author Christian Bernard. And so just remember that. So he was a heart surgeon. And where did he finish his studies? And what about his family? What about his brother who died? And what are the works which were written by Christian Bernard? And what is the lesson in celebration of being alive is about? So this is what is covered in this particular text, in this particular place where about the writer is written. And next, let us come back to the essay. Yes, let me read out and explain. Look at the text, please. More and more, as I near the end of my career as a heart surgeon, my thoughts have turned to the consideration of why people should suffer. So, here, Dr. Christian Bernard is saying that as his age is becoming older and as he is going to end his career as a heart surgeon, that means he was in the age of retirement from his profession, that is heart surgeon. So when he was going to become old, then his thoughts have turned to the consideration of why people should suffer. So he got a thought that why people should suffer in the world, why there must be suffering in the world. ఎందుకు ప్రపంచంలో ఈ యొక్క సఫరింగ్ అనేది ఉండాలి, ప్రజలు ఎందుకు ఇబ్బంది పడాలి, కష్టపడాలి, శ్రమ పడాలి అని చెప్పి అంటా ఉన్నాడు. నెక్స్ట్, సఫరింగ్ సీమ్స్ సో క్రూయల్లీ ప్రివాలెంట్ ఇన్ ద వరల్డ్ టుడే. So suffering is ruling in the whole world. So everywhere you see the suffering of the poor people, suffering of the unemployed people, suffering of children, suffering of the patients in the hospital. So everywhere this suffering is cruelly prevalent. Prevalent means existing in the world today. Next, do you know that of the 125 million children born this year, 12 million are unlikely to reach the age of 1? So here he is giving the facts. What is that? Is that 125 million children are born this year. If 125 million people are born this year, what happens? You know that 12 million children are unlikely to reach the age of 1. That means in 125 million children who are born in a particular year, nearly 10% of the children would die before they get the age of 1 year. So this is a very pathetic situation. This is a very sad thing. And next, he also gives some more information. And another 6 million will die before the age of 5. Do you know one more information that another 6 million in 125 million will die before the age of 5? Before the age of 5, some more 6 million children will die. Next, and of the rest, many will end up as a mental or physical cripples. Cripples means injuries. So already in 125 million, 12 million they die before the age of 1 year. So and in the remaining, so 6 million children will die before the age of 5. And he is also adding, saying that and in the remaining many children will end up as a mental or physical cripples. That means they suffer from mental injuries and physical injuries. Why? Why it has to happen? Why it is happening? Why there is suffering everywhere in the world? And so he hates suffering, and he thinks that why there must be suffering in the world. So, as he is going to retire from his profession as a heart surgeon, he was thinking about human sufferings, and he is giving the example in this particular paragraph about how many children are born in a year and how many die before 1 year and how many die before 5 years of age, and how many will remain injured mentally and physically in the remaining people of those 125 million children. So finally, in this particular paragraph, what Christian Bernard wants to say that why there must be suffering, why people should suffer. This is the question which he was trying to pose to his own heart about the human suffering, why there must be suffering in the world. Next, if you go to the second paragraph, look at the second paragraph. My gloomy thoughts probably stem from an accident I had few years ago. One minute I was crossing the street with my wife after a lovely meal together, and the next minute a car hit me and knocked me into my wife. So, here in this particular paragraph, in the next paragraph, the writer, Dr. Christian Bernard, wants to explain or describe an accident he had a few years ago. So, he met with the accident a few years ago. What happened? What happened is that when he was crossing the street with his wife after a lovely meal together, they had meal in a hotel, and they were crossing the road, and the next minute, immediately after that, what happened is a car hit him and knocked him into his wife. So a car has come and hit him first, and then he was knocked into his wife. Knocked into his wife means his body was jumped and fallen on his wife. And so what happened then? She was thrown into the other lane. So by this force she was thrown to the other lane and struck by a car. So then she was struck by a car. So a very sad accident. So a very clear description of what happened in his life, and especially during the time of accident. So a car has hit him and he has fallen on the other lane, and he was knocked into his wife first, and his wife was thrown into other lane, and then she was struck by a car coming from the opposite direction. Next, during the next few days in the hospital, I experienced not only agony and fear but also anger. So what happened later? What happened later is, in the hospital he was admitted because of the injuries which he and his wife faced. And so in the hospital he experienced not only the agony means pain, and he experienced fear also, fear about his life, fear about his family, fear about his future, and he was also experiencing anger also. So why there is angry because he was thinking why this has happened to us, why God has allowed this accident to us, and why we had to suffer. So this is what he was in angry. Next, I could not understand why my wife and I had to suffer. I had 11 broken ribs and a perforated lung. So this is what happened to him after accident. So immediately after accident, it was found that 11 broken ribs. So his ribs were broken 11 places, and next a perforated lung also. So his lung was pierced, so pierced by a rod or pierced by an instrument. I mean that his lung was damaged. And next, my wife had a badly fractured shoulder. So what happened to his wife is that her shoulder was badly fractured. Next, over and over, I asked myself, why should this happen to us? So again and again, he was asking, why this problem or accident should happen to us? Yeah, why? And then he was asking one more question. I had to do work. I had work to do. After all, there were patients waiting for me to operate on them, and my wife had a young baby who needed her care. So why we had to suffer? ఎందుకు మేము సఫర్ అవ్వాల్సి వచ్చింది? ఎందుకు మాకు ఇలా జరగాల్సి వచ్చింది? I had work to do. So I had much work to do. After all, there were patients waiting for me to operate on them. So what is the work I must do? I am helping the patients, I am saving the lives, and I am saving many people's lives, and I have patients to operate on them. So why this happened to us? And then my wife had a young baby who needed her care. So why my wife had a fractured shoulder? My wife also has to take care of a young baby. So why this thing must happen to us? So why this accident must happen to us? This is what is the question which he asked. So let me tell you one important thing. So in the previous paragraph, the writer, Dr. Kristen Bernard, wanted to give the explanation of why there must be suffering and how many children are suffering every year, how many lives are lost, children's lives are lost every year, and why should there be suffering in the world? This is the question which he asked. And in this second paragraph, so what the writer wants to say that he explained or described the accident which he and his wife had experienced, and what happened to him and what happened to his wife, and what are his thoughts after the accident, and how he felt the agony, pain, and fear, and even anger. Why he was anger means that why he had to face this particular accident, and why he had to suffer, because he was doing a very good deed to looking after the patients and saving the lives of the patients, and why his wife has to suffer, because she has a baby to take care of. So why God has allowed this particular suffering to them? So this is what he posed the question by giving the description of accident in their lives. So this is the second paragraph. Next, let us go to the third paragraph. My father, had he still been alive, would have said, "My son, it is God's will. That is the way God tests you. Suffering ennobles you, makes you a better person." See, here Dr. Kristen Bernard wants to say how his father feels about suffering and how he feels about suffering. So, what is the view of Christian Bernard about suffering, and what is the view of his own dad or father about suffering? So, what his father says about this accident or about suffering if he had been alive. That means when this accident occurred, his father was no more. He died before the accident occurred to Christian Bernard, and now he was recollecting, saying that if my father is alive, he must have said like this and he must have thought like this. How? He must have said like this: my son, it is God's will. That is the way God tests you. Suffering ennobles you, makes you a better person. Ennobles. Ennobles means making you noble, making you great. So, this is the meaning of that. And so, what the father might say if he was alive, he might say that my son Christian Bernard, it is the God's will that you had to go to the experience of this accident and suffering. It is the God's will, and that is the way God tests you. God tests you like this, and suffering ennobles you. So this suffering makes you noble. This suffering makes you great, and it makes you a better person. This is what my father would say if he was alive. And then, but as a doctor, I see nothing noble in a patient's thrashing around in a sweat soaked bed. So, thrashing around means moving restlessly with pain. So, and sweat soaked bed. So, that means this is the description of the patient's beds. So, where the patients, you know, experience much pain and suffering. So, as the doctor, I see nothing noble in patients' suffering, patients' pain. So, it is not a noble thing. So, suffering is not a noble thing, according to me, according to Christian Bernard. That is what he says. And there is nothing great in the patient's pain, and there is nothing great in the patient's agony mind. Next, nor can I see any nobility in the crying of a lonely child in a ward at night. So, is there any nobility? He's asking the question. Can I see any nobility in the crying of a lonely child in a ward at night? So, there is no nobility in a lonely child who is there in ward at night, who was in the ICU, who was in the operation theater. So, a lonely child, a small baby suffering, it is not a noble thing. So, this is what he says in this particular paragraph. So, in this paragraph, so he talked about, as the doctor, what is his view about the pain and suffering of patients, and what is the view of his father about suffering. So, his father says that suffering is a good thing, and suffering is the test of God on human beings, and suffering makes you noble and suffering makes you great. But as the doctor Christian Bernard was saying that there is no nobility in the pain of a patient on the bed, and there is no nobility in the pain of a lonely child who was there in the operation theater or in ICU. So his view is different from his father's view. So with all this we can understand that from the before three paragraphs we can understand that we finished three paragraphs, and out of all these three paragraphs we can understand that Christian Bernard's thought and his view on suffering is this. So he, according to him, why there must be suffering in the world, this is the question which he asks. So remember that. Next, I had my first introduction to the suffering of children when I was a little boy. One day, my father showed me a half eaten mouldy biscuit with two tiny tooth marks in it, and he told me about my brother who had died several years earlier. And so, here in this paragraph, Dr. Christian Barnard was explaining his first introduction to suffering of children. So, in the whole essay, he talks about many times about the suffering of children in the hospitals. And here he gives the first description or the first introduction to the suffering of the children, what he has seen in his childhood itself, what the writer Christian Barnard had experienced in his childhood itself. What is that? What is that? Is that no, one day his father has showed him half-eaten mouldy biscuit. Mouldy means old biscuit with two tiny tooth marks in that. So his father once he has shown Dr. Christian Barnard this old biscuit with two tiny marks in that, and he told me about my brother who had died several years earlier. He told me about the suffering of this child who had been born with an abnormal heart. So what is this biscuit? So by showing this biscuit, his father said to Dr. Christian Barnard about his brother. So Christian Barnard's brother, one of his brothers. So we have already seen about that in the introduction to the writer. So there we have seen that Abraham, who died at the age of 5 years, his own brother, Christian Barnard's brother, died because of the heart failure. And so this is about that boy. And so his father has shown the biscuit and said to him that this is the biscuit which your brother has eaten in the last days of his life. And so, for the remembrance, father has preserved this particular biscuit in order to show and remember his son who died in the early days of his childhood, so before 5 years only. So he has shown that. And next, he told me about the suffering of this child who had been born with an abnormal heart. Because of abnormal heart, because of not a proper heart, he died. And then if he had been born today, probably someone could have corrected that heart problem. So the Christian Barnard was saying that if he is born today, so in this technological days, and when science and technology is improved, if he is born in these days, so his life must have been saved. But as he was born in the olden days, and he was born when there was no particular technology to save the children who are suffering from these heart failures, so because of that he died. And then, but in those days they did not have sophisticated heart surgery, and so because of that he died. And this mouldy biscuit was the last biscuit my brother had eaten before his death. So this is the biscuit of which his brother had eaten before he died. So this is for the remembrance of his brother. So his father, Christian Barnard's father, has preserved this biscuit and has shown to Dr. Christian Barnard. And so after looking at that, Christian Barnard's heart was in pain, thinking about why my brother suffered in his childhood. And so this is the first experience which he faced about the children suffering in the childhood itself. So this is what we can find in this particular paragraph. And then if we go to the next paragraph, let us see. As a doctor, I have always found the suffering of children particularly heartbreaking, especially because of their total trust in doctors and nurses. As he was the doctor, Dr. Christian Barnard feels, very sad and looking at the suffering of the children in the hospitals. It is very heartbreaking for him. It is a very, painful thing for him. especially because of the children trusting the doctors and nurses, and they in the childhood itself they surrender all their lives to doctors' knives, doctors' scissors, and to the doctor's hands they surrender even in the childhood itself. Next, they believe you are going to help them. So these children will believe that these doctors and nurses will definitely help us and they save our lives. And if you cannot, they accept their fate. If you are not able to save their lives, they accept their fate. But they suffer and they surrender to the doctor's hands and they submit themselves to the doctors and nurses' hands to save their lives. So this is a very painful thing or heartbreaking thing for the writer Dr. Christian Barnard. And then they go through mutilating surgery. So mutilating means damaging the body severely. So they go through by allowing themselves to get damaged of their body for surgery, and afterwards they don't complain. So after the surgery also they don't complain, saying that this doctor has done the surgery for me, and likewise they don't complain. And one morning several years ago I witnessed what I call the Grand Prix of Cape Town's Red Cross Children Hospital. Now here one more incident about human suffering. So the writer wants to describe here one more incident of children's suffering. The writer wants to describe here. So for that he was talking about this race, Grand Prix. Grand Prix means it is a car race. So a car race of Cape Town's Red Cross Children Hospital. So what is this car race and so on? In the hospital, what is the car race? It may be wonder for you. So let us know it in the next lines. What is the car race? And then it opened my eyes to the fact that I was missing something in all my thinking about suffering, something basic that was full of solace for me. Solace means comfort or the happiness. So this particular car race in the Red Cross Children's Hospital, so what the writer Christian Barnard had witnessed, had seen with his own eyes, that car race by children made him to change his view of suffering, and it made him to change his thinking about suffering. And this incident in the Red Cross Children Hospital made him to get comfort and to get solace for him. So this is the basic thing that made and that was full of solace for the writer, full of comfort for the writer, which made the writer comfortable and which made the writer happy. So what is that car race, and what is the car race which made the writer to change his view about suffering? What is the car race which made the writer to be happy and to know the importance of life, so to change his view about suffering? So far we have seen that he has a view of suffering, and which is a different view from his father. His father thinks that suffering is great, and suffering makes a person better, and suffering is God's plan, and it is God's will. This is what his father thinks. But Christian Barnard thinks that why there must be suffering? There must not be suffering. So if there is suffering, the children are dying in their encourage itself. And so this suffering does not make a person noble, but it makes a person sad, and it makes a person to lose very valuable time in his life. And this is what his view. But you know, uh, in this paragraph, that car race made the writer to change his view of suffering. And finally, at the end of this particular text, we can understand that how his father thought about suffering. So the writer Christian Bernard also changed his view, and he was also thinking like his father. So let us come to know about that in the next paragraphs. So what is the car race, and what the car race which made the writer to change his view about suffering. So let us come to know about that car race in the next lines. So this is what is the half part of the explanation of in celebration of being alive. And there is some more essay. That is the remaining half of the essay. So in the next video, let us let us listen to the explanation of the remaining part of the essay. So with this, I will conclude the first part of the explanation of In Celebration of Being Alive by Dr. Christian Bernard. Thank you.